Venue connectivity is the biggest change to hit the broadcast world, really in a generation. In this session, we're going to get some insight from industry leaders on how this connectivity impacts not only on broadcasters, but also on rights holders and sports brands in the way they communicate with their audiences, both on a local scale and globally. So let's welcome back to the stage from ADI TV, Geraint Williams. James Clement is joining us again from Sky Sports. The broadcast operations manager of the Premier League, Nick Morgan, is joining us. And from IMG, the director of business development, Ollie Scott. And to give us a venue perspective from Middlesbrough, the chief operating officer, Mark Ellis. Now, this season, the Premier League and the Football League have undertaken initiatives to connect all 92 professional Football League stadia to live venue, ADI's broadcast fibre network. Now, we're going to explore the reasons for this and some of the ways that broadcasters, rights holders and football clubs are using that network to their advantage. So let's start with what the importance of a connected network is. Why would you want that in a venue? And I'm going to ask Nick for you to kick off with that, please.
I think for us, there's two parts to it really. One, it's actually satisfying demand, particularly the amount of overseas broadcasters now who want to come on site, be part of the action, so that they can localise the delivery of the Premier League for their own markets. So ultimately, it's about getting their content out of our venues. So that really was, if like, the main driver for us to look, or why we looked at getting some dedicated connectivity to service overseas broadcasters. But for not a lot of money, they can come on site and they themselves be part of making it local, rather than just taking a standard sort of world feed that we produce.
Ollie, perhaps you can talk a bit about what it's like for the overseas broadcasters to get content. I mean, how did it work before?
Well, not as efficiently as it does now. I mean, Nick's alluded to most of the reasons as to why we did it, but typically we were stuck with satellite delivery mechanisms, and very quickly the OB compounds would get used up. It's been fantastic, really. It's the opportunity that we now have that previously wasn't there, and is very cost effective.
I think James has already discussed how it's helped from a broadcasting perspective in terms of delivering content. But Mark, perhaps we could come to you. At Middlesbrough, as a club, why did you specifically want to and need to connect to live venue?
I think first and foremost, driving revenues for the club, and getting engagement with fans to do that. And engagement for me starts with timely and interesting communications. And basically, live venue has given us that tool far easier than it would have been to invest ourselves. It's given us a future-proofing tool. We've not had to invest in the technology. And we've got the tools now to engage with our fans.
Well, Geraint, you're the ones who did invest in the technology. What led you to build the network in the first place?
I think our work with clubs, we were seeing a trend more and more. So I think the work that was done with the Premier League and with Sky in the UK, the expectation of the fan was much greater in terms of content. But actually, the challenge for the actual venues themselves. And I remember sitting with one of the chief execs at one of the Premier League clubs once, and him saying to me, the challenge we've got is we need a state-of-the-art production television centre, but we only actually want to use it 19 times a year. We could see the opportunity within fibre by essentially trying to create a network that everybody could buy into. We saw the opportunity, therefore, to take a pipe, and I mean, in the very early brainstorming sessions we had here, we had essentially a pie chart, and we just started to divide the pie chart up, and we said, actually, if we can put a pipe into the venue, and we can get a chunk of that pipe to basically provide connectivity for Sky, and a chunk of that pipe to provide connectivity to the Premier League, and a chunk to provide connectivity for IMG for the work they do with the Premier League, and actually then we get all that content and send it back down to the venues.
Okay, so that's the importance of why the network is needed. What about how we use it, and what a typical match day scenario might be? James, we're going to start with you for that. How has it affected production values?
So immediately at the beginning of this season, the request came from the editorial guys for Soccer Saturday to say they were going to go on air at 12 and go off air just before the Saturday Night Football show started, or before the game started. So I needed to be able to give them opportunities for content for that entire window. And that meant across the Premier League and the Football League, we would, all the way up to 3 o'clock, try and get fresh content that was relevant, fresh, and that the viewer would actually take. So a part of the Premier League rules, there were the press conferences, pre-match manager interviews that we knew we were going to be getting, which we could actually get back, put those in. There are wide shots of simple things. When we go in and out of breaks, they can show a wide shot of the ground filling up. That was content we wouldn't have before. They would just talk about something, but we can actually show relevant content. So they would show a shot of Craven Cottage, show fans running around, go to break. It's a very simple shot that's got a small value attached to it within Sky, but helps the editorial relevance throughout the afternoon stay strong.
So that's a domestic broadcast view. What about internationally, Ollie? How has it changed things for the international broadcasters?
Well, similarly to what James said, I mean, our broadcasters are no different. You know, they have the same requirements that Sky have. They want that same content, those same wide shots. We can also get all of that content and offer it to them live. So it really helps to maximise the gazillions of dollars that they've spent on the rights fees in the first place, really.
So it helps them to personalise it, if you like,
absolutely,
their output
so,
and make it different from everyone else.
Exactly, and also to concentrate on players that are of particular interest to them.
Mark, from a venue perspective, how do you use it? Could you perhaps talk us through the process of how the content is compiled and how it's used at the Cellnet?
I think the three phases really that we look at. I mean, the easiest one is the in-match content, and to be frank, ADI take care of that. That one we use a lot with our sponsors. That's where the revenue comes from. The ball goes out of play, there's an advert. Getting the right balance though on the adverts and the content is quite key. The second area we use is, I'd say, the 40 minutes before the game, or up to 20 minutes before the game, I should say, where a lot of that is information that the club want to get across to the fans, or fans have actually asked us to do things, things going on around the Teesside area, for instance. We'll get pre-planned shots and they'll be worked on with ADI, all planned in advance. The last 20 minutes before the game and half time is a little bit more chaotic when things go on. And we're 1 year in and learning the way, but one of the things we've done is redirected our camera resources to actually live camera on the match day, so that they're shooting fans, something going on the pitch at half-time, penalties or tunnel shots. And that's creating a lot more interest, and it's something we're going to try and do a lot more of. And capturing that shots isn't just match day, it gives us a lot more content for 24/7 engagement, which is the other aspect to this.
Geraint, what happens on match day here?
Coming from an OB company, we're used to being on site, so I guess bringing it here is a bit like, I mean, it's almost like operating drones in a bunker, really, in a different way, because you make it far more focused. You're actually able to focus on the content and the technicals far easier. Having all that content in one place, which actually makes a real big difference, and that, I think, then translates to it being smoother. Internally, it's split between a very technical team who are literally doing all the lineups and working with both Sky and IMG to make sure that those lineups are there, and you've got those broadcasters around the world all taking the feeds. And then really it's the content side, that our content team internally, then going back to what Mark's saying about sending that content back to the venues, it's about creating that engagement, and it's then about capturing that engagement on for use afterwards.
And Nick, if we can come to you from the Premier League perspective, what would be the typical usage for the Premier League, and how has the network grown since it was introduced?
Well, primarily our fundamental usage is all via Premier League production, I guess. So I guess for those who don't know, just to explain, we appoint IMG to run Premier League productions for us, which essentially makes our world feed and distributes everything that our 3 UK broadcasters generate all around the live match for us overseas, as well as running a channel or a content service. In that way are satisfied primarily via IMG. I guess the other thing I didn't mention earlier, really, in terms of the, obviously the satisfying demand, generating demand, is also the adding value part of it. As Ollie so eloquently put, our broadcasters do spend quite a lot of money, and for us to give something back, or at least try to maximise for them the benefit they get. They're not yet anywhere near being able to choose their own cameras quite. But the more we can do that, adding the wide shot so they can permanently have that in the back of their TV monitors, giving them the opportunity to make presentations at any time during the match day. We've only ever had on the match day what we've got, what you've seen at home. Now, often, obviously, for half-time analysis, for full-time analysis, for review shows, these broadcasters around the world want more than that. So actually, for us, if like as the middleman, we're just trying to sort of be the broker of that. And there's a bit of a bottleneck really up until now in terms of getting this out more widely to our broadcasters.
The commercial benefits of using remote production, and how does that impact on fan engagement?
First and foremost, obviously sponsorship. With the big screen and the concourse TV setup, you've got opportunities there to get revenue. But as I said earlier, getting the balance right on that is quite key. I've been to a few stadia where it's all adverts and nobody looks at it. The thing we've done, and we are still learning, it's the first year, we've moved our internal and third-party resources onto capturing other events around the stadium so that we've got that content to show as well. And that's where a lot of the fans are getting something out of it and coming back. Many things, for instance, in our family zone on a match day, we tend to focus on that's going on, and simple things, just showing some of the kids enjoying themselves actually just brings them back, week after week, and that's what we want. We want to get more people through the gates. So it's actually moving our internal resource into other areas and letting ADI take care of the bits that they're good at, and then using that tool to the best of our ability.
Geraint, if perhaps you could just sum up then from your experience, because you are getting feedback from the clubs, I imagine, all the time, what the appeal is of the network for users.
The actual expectation of the clubs has grown massively, so we've now got 11 clubs using remote production from here on a match day. So rather than them having to install complicated and very expensive television studios, back to that, only using them 19, 20 times a year, we're now producing the content from here, and I think that's been massive. We're just about to start construction on another building on the site here with another 23 galleries, so that probably gives you a good understanding of the expectation that clubs have got. If you're sat there saying, well, we can build you a television studio, it's going to cost you £250,000, it's not a very compelling proposition to most clubs. If you're sat there saying, well, actually there is zero capex, but what we can then do is charge you on a match-by-match basis for a facility here, which is an aggregated facility. That makes a huge difference. It again means the clubs are not going to have to buy the actual solutions themselves. And I mean, just editing content is a prime example, with the amount of storage and content and the amount of space it takes up and the bandwidth. That on an individual basis, if you're going to go and do that through all the league football clubs around the country and build almost 92 facilities to edit football, and then you get into the other sports such as cricket and rugby and horse racing, it becomes an immense undertaking and very costly. Going back to my comment before about aggregation of rights, and the mirroring that is the aggregation of cost savings. If you can ultimately achieve that by bringing all of those into one place and actually ingesting and holding content and everybody using the same content, then that makes a huge difference.
While I've got you here captive, I'm going to ask you all if there was one piece of advice that you could give, what would that advice be? Mark, I'm going to start with you again. From a club or venue perspective, what advice would you give if someone was looking to install the network?
I think get the roles and accountabilities clear from the start, because introducing live venue changes what you do, and it impacts quite a lot of people, and you've got to be really clear what you then expect of them afterwards.
What advice would you give to rights holders?
We sat down and looked at this, and for a while couldn't imagine where we were going to get the usage. And 6 months into the season, and we're already looking at doubling our capacities.
Is there any advice that you would give to venues from a broadcast perspective?
I think the biggest benefit that we had at Sky was that the conversations around the Premier League and the Football League involved all the parties who were ever going to attend that venue. When you're doing something like this, I completely agree with Ollie. If you build it, they will come and everyone will start to use it, because the market's been crying out for someone to open the door and offer something else, but because of the kind of gearing of it to be a venue and rights-owned solution that's offered to everyone who goes there, because there aren't very many sports where there's one dominant party using everything on site. You need to bring those people together and understanding their needs. I think it's important that everyone on board has a say, and that'd be my advice. Talk to each other.
Geraint, any advice?
I think it's hard it's hard to get people to understand and see what it is. I think, I've often described live venues a bit like electricity. It's great, but actually, unless you do something with it, it's actually not going to do anything. I think it's getting people to come and understand. And I think, that our whole thinking around the Sports VMT was really to offer people that opportunity to come and get the right kind of takers together and get some engagement around it, and ultimately have a look at what we do. I think it's not about technology, it is about content. I mean, we're all sat here, we all have a role and an involvement in technology, but actually it's just about content, is what people see.
Okay, I'm now going to throw things open to the floor. Is there anyone who would like to ask any of the panel a question?
Hello, Marcel Ridyard, AFL Architects. As we work on stadiums and venues, it's very interesting for us to know at the beginning what we need to do to engage with all this as well. Do you think it should be stadium and management led, as Mark's finding now, or should it be the industry and the media leading it? Who's leading this? Because it seems to be very open, which is exciting, but it's not clear.
I think you probably hit the nail on the head there. I think it's about getting together. I mean, we as a team have spent an inordinate amount of time together looking at what do these people want and how can you get everybody together in that way. And I think we've tried really hard over the, not just recently, but over the 20 odd years of ADI, we've tried very hard to make sure that we are not having a conflicting business operation. We're not sat here and in the same time we've got someone within business trying to sell rights or step on toes. And I think as long as you can get a really open forum and everybody trusts each other, and you can all say, well, actually, I need this from this, and I need this and this, and this is what we need, then you can make it work really well.
Really, the infrastructure requirements on the clubs now are just going up exponentially. I was saying to Nick on the way in the car, the Premier League requirements for media are just phenomenal. And Middlesbrough's got a stadium that was built in '95, and it just cannot meet these requirements. It just cannot do it. So the investment we would have to make to be able to comply with the direction we're moving in here is certainly beyond our means in the short term. And I think there's got to be some sort of review there very quickly, because the gap between Premier League and Championship is widening.
I think I can add a bit from a Sky point of view, because obviously we've been key in the Premier League over the years, and there is a shift now for the decision making around infrastructure to be it was previously always a Sky installed system, and now it's a much more Premier League led worldwide system so that people can access them. So to directly answer your question, I think it's right, in my view, it's rights owners working with the venue that's going to have a particular sport in. Now, if you're Hull or something like that, maybe there's a little bit of a clash there between what football and what rugby league may need, but I think the discussion should be led there, because in a 3-year rights process, you could find that the broadcaster that had all the main influence is gone, and there's another one in there. So you want the rights owners to be leading that, and then there's a working group for the Premier League that brings on all the different elements of the broadcasters to discuss their needs. And then, in my view, that rights owner should then speak to all the clubs that are part of that league or cup or whatever it is to actually implement them and make them reasonable. Because largely it'll be the rights owner that's giving the money to the club to start with and asking them to spend that money.
I think, and just to expand on that, James is right. It is something that we've centrally taken control of. We can offer a standard of service across all 20 clubs, rather than just having perhaps amazing facilities at the Emirates or a new stadium that you might think of. It all comes down to fan engagement one way or the other, whether it's a fan engaged sitting somewhere around the world watching it on TV, or a fan in the stadium. I know we're going to come on to that in later sessions about that engagement with the stadium. I think the club will always have their own goals in terms of maximising value, maximising their own fan engagement. So I don't think there's a simple answer of, it's just us or just them. It is a combination.
Right, I'm going to bring that debate to a close now. It's been a long session, and there's been lots and lots to absorb in that. If I could just ask you to thank our panel, Geraint, James, Nick, Ollie and Mark.